Fear this Alpha and his Omegas. Here's your look at McFarlane Toys, DC Multiverse, DC Classics, Darkseid. In the known DC multiverse, one name stands above all others when it comes to supreme villainy, Darkseid. Ruling over a hellish world of apocalypse, Darkseid doesn't merely mean to conquer a planet or subjugate its enemies. He seeks to rob the entire universe of its free will and replace it with his own. Straight from Apocalypse, and with some accessories. Before we get a closer look at the DC Multiverse, DC Classics Darkseid, let's take the tape measure and we'll see how tall the figure actually stands. Now, I know one of the big issues a lot of collectors face with this figure is the fact he does have a cape and the Darkseid logo D on the front of his chest. The figure is actually based on the original 80s Kenner Darkseid, who also sported a very similar style of cape. I know we are getting as well a Build-A-Figure Darkseid that's going to be using this mold again. He's going to be part of the DC Task Force line. Unfortunately, though, he's going to have cell shading to him, so I hope at some point we're going to be getting this mold again, but without the cape. All that being said, though, let's take the tape measure like as promised, and the figure is going to in fact stand about 8 3/4 of an inch in height, or the ruler of Apocalypse is about 22 centimeters tall. Now, scaling this guy, unfortunately, to other villains of Superman might be a little bit more difficult, because if you like bring in, for example, Calabac compared to DC Classics Darkseid is clearly way too tall. I don't know if we are going to be getting another version of Calabac, but Calabac really should be only about this high. It's the only one thing I will say, though, about McFarlane's team is that they don't really scale this figure line as one class. Darkseid right away should be a lot taller. I mean, Calabac, I think when he was initially released, should have been already a smaller figure. He also, as well, if you bring in, say, the likes of Doomsday, I feel like, again, like Darkseid should be taller than Doomsday. When you also bring in, say, like the Anti-Monitor, pardon my hairy arm, by the way, still, he's about the same size, and he is also shorter, surprisingly, as Mongol. As also, as well, if we're going to be talking about Superman villains, why not bring in the Man of Steel? This is the one from Action Comics. Served up now are Darkseid's accessories. I don't have a silver platter, I'm sorry. Figure, though, comes included with the DC logo stand. The logo of the DC is a little harder to make it out, but it's right there. Much easier, I'm sure, to see is the neighboring peg that can plug into either one of Darkseid's boots. The figure also comes included with a pretty cool-looking classic card. It looks like the days of the DC Cosmic cards. Anybody remember those? Some of my favorite cards. I still actually have the set I had from high school. Darkseid, of course, you can see is featured on the front. Still with the cape, still with the Darkseid D there on the front of his chest. And he also looks like, well, he doesn't have Omega beams jetting out from his eyes. He has these flaming things going all around his arms. On the back of the card, though, his real name is Nah. Actually, no, his real name is N.A. Nobody knows what it is. And then, of course, there is also as well a paragraph read. You can pause and read for yourself. If you don't want to do that, just say that it's one of those lazy days. I don't feel like reading anything. I've had similar days like that. I've actually already had a lazy day, but I still managed to read that for you. It was at the beginning of this review, so no need to thank me. Let's move that off to the side. The figure does also come include some swappable hands. So as already, you can probably see the figure does have a closed fist over here and a grabbing hand over here. If you did want to have them both with closed fists, the figure basically has that hand as a mirror flip to this side. Basically just unplug the hand that he has over here and replace it with this hand instead. The figure also comes included with a pointing hand. So again, if you don't want to have that hand over there, that one there, the figure does have this pointing hand instead. He doesn't have any other accessories. I mean, to be fair, though, he does come with a swappable head sculpt, and the head does have the Omega beams, so that's saying something. Speaking of which, though, the figure does, as mentioned, have that. The thing I really like that's cool about it is the way they've designed the Omega beams. So it's not just the beams protruding out from his eyes, although they don't really look as much like they're coming out from his eyes until you kind of look at it from the bottom. You can see it basically takes up his entire cavity. But if you look at it from this side, it almost looks like they're only coming out from the middle area, or the little center section there. What's that little area there that has the sleep and the tear ducts? Looks like it's only coming from his tear ducts. I do also like this side. So it just looks like it's like if you were like in an anime series, for example, this thing would just be a starburst. I think that's really kind of cool. I don't know if I'm going to really be displaying the figure, though, with this head, just because, again, I really like the head that he already has on his shoulders right now. Speaking, though, of which, picking up the figure right now, Darkseid, though not his defaulted head, I already swapped that out at the beginning of this review. To be fair, though, actually, the defaulted head was this head here, but I kind of want to start at the more neutral expression first before we get to more zanier looking designs. One thing, though, that's very different, obviously, between the two, the obvious one is that his Omega beams aren't there. But, like, this one also doesn't have the sneer in his face. This one does. You know, again, like, both head sculpts are really good. For my personal collection space and shelf, I'm going to go with this head sculpt as my favorite of the two. It also kind of reminds me of the days, like, was it the Superpowers Galactic Guardians? Oh, I love that cartoon. I think back then, Darkseid was voiced by the same guy that voiced Dr. Claw? Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. Head sculpt, again, looks really quite good on this figure. The paint is good as well. You can see, like, although his eyes are much smaller to read, you can see that they're done in a very bright red. The head sculpt, by the way it attaches, you don't actually remove the entire head and leave the neck behind. You actually have to take the neck, too. The neck and the head are actually, well, if you're looking at them, they're one piece. So, like, just put the figure down here for a second. If you look at the head, the neck and the head are one piece. So there's no chance at all that when you go to want to take both, the neck's going to stay behind. When one goes, the other one's going to go with it. The changing of the head, by the way, was one thing I thought, like, if I took the head off, would I be able to then get off the cape? The cape is, no, unfortunately, still permanently attached. It's not attached only by just his head alone. That what they've done is they've rooted it inside the D logo. There was no way that I can see, at least, that you can pry this off, because I was kind of thinking for a second, well, if I pop this off, I can live with the D, and then I can just take the cape off from the back of it. But it looks like it's really attached on there. Plus, I don't want to start pulling this off, and the risk that I damage the plastic around it. But again, like the cape, if you like the classic days of the Kenner, like this would be the Superpowers Darkseid, would have had a nice flowing cape on the back of his body. To change the head out, by the way, I'm just going to yank the entire thing off. And you have to be also careful doing this too, because the post, if you're looking at it, doesn't actually have a secondary ball joint at the base of this. It's actually molded completely to his body. Because, like, I was thinking at one point, oh, I wonder if I can bend this back maybe because it's too close to the front of his torso. And no, you can't. It is actually molded inside. So it only actually has one ball joint as disposal. Go ahead and just take the head that we want to use. And by the way, just before I do that, though, like I said, though, the cape, if you flip the cape forward, you can see it's not attached at all to the shoulders. It's certainly not attached to the back of his body either. It is only attached by fed-through holes there on the top of the D. Again, if there was a way to pry this off, I'm sure there is, but it's not like you could really leave this off either. You would just have a big unsightly hole in its place. I'm sure there could have been a way that they could have swapped this out with just a peg, a flat peg piece, but then again, you would only just notice a circle there anyways. So unless we do get ourselves a regular classic Darkseid, I know, again, we are getting ourselves the DC Task Force Darkseid, but it's essentially going to be like this color, but it's going to be cell shaded, so it's going to have like dark. It's supposed to look like the old days, I guess, of the comics. But let's go ahead and just pop the head back in place. We want to make sure, of course, we fold the cape down first before we do anything. And when you're doing this, too, you want to really make sure that you don't push pressure against these. They're softer plastic, but still, be careful. Come on. Don't be rough with your figures. Go ahead and just pop that onto the ball joint. You want to make sure it's all the way on there, too, because if not, when you go to start rotating the figure's head, you might find that you then pop the head off by accident. The cape, though, on the back of it, obviously, as you can see, wireframe cape, which is good. It's wired here. It's wired along the bottom, and it's wired on the side. It certainly does if you want to have a little bit more of energy in your poses. I mean, at the beginning of this review, I sort of had the cape arched like this, but I mean, like, you could do really with whatever you want. The only problem, obviously, you can never, it's like getting a prize out of a cereal box. You can never really quite get the box back the way it was when you first found it in the stores. The cape, you know, again, it's always going to have sort of this weird looking bent piece of the wire down below where I've already fiddled around with it. But again, I like the cape. I just wish there was a way that you would have made it, you could have removed it. And again, I don't know how they could have removed it other than maybe, no, you couldn't have removed it, because even if it was just the head that was keeping the cape in place, you'd still have this D logo that's not on normal Darkseid. It would only be here on the Kenner Darkseid. Still, though, for the rest of the figure's body, nicely sculpted are the arms. Like, he does feel a little more hollow. If you like comparing him, for example, against Calabac, which again, like proportion-wise, he's a little too small compared to Calabac. Calabac, though being a bigger figure, does feel like he's a little lighter. Darkseid does have like a little bit more meat to him, but I do feel like maybe his torso is hollow. I mean, certainly his legs aren't hollow. Actually, one thing interesting about the legs, when I got this guy out of the packaging, his leg came off easily. In fact, you can see how easily it comes off now. It is a case of you just obviously pop it back in place, but I mean, for the times I've done this already, when I go to move the leg around, usually that's always the thing that ends up popping it off again. I don't know if it's going to be the case on your Darkseid. Let me know down below, but it seems certainly to be the case with mine. For the figure's articulation, we're sticking with this head sculpt because, again, like the neck and the head are all one piece. You go to move the neck, you're going to be moving the head as well. So it only moves back and forth. It doesn't really move up and down all that much. It actually looks down a lot more than it does look up. But again, you got a little bit of a rock there too. The upper torso is only really going to be on a ball joint. The arms obviously hinge out. But again, like when you are moving the arms, why is my Darkseid falling apart on me? Periodically, though, I've noticed with my Darkseid, when I go to move the arm, the arms seem to be frequently popping off. This arm's not so bad, but it seems to really be only on this side of his body. This arm and this leg, for me at least, fall off frequently. The arms move forward and back. Again, they're going to be popping off a little bit too much. Actually, this was the first time that this side of the arm actually fell off like that. Arm's going to rotate all the way around. He has a single hinge only in his elbow, or I guess kind of really where his elbow would bend. There is also no swivel here. There seems like there should be. I mean, you can move it a little bit, but not a whole lot. The way they've kind of sculpted this, so like the peg goes straight through here. There's a little bit, like I feel like there's a bit of a suggestion that you could swivel it, but you can't really do it by much. Hands, though, certainly do rotate all the way around. You can hinge them also back and forth, too. The legs certainly do split. Just be careful that the legs don't pop off in the process. Move them forward and back only by a little bit. There's a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Double hinge on the knee. And again, you got your articulation there in his ankle. A bit of a rocker. And, of course, he's got the toe articulation there as well. A bit of an older figure. I mean, this figure came out last year, and I'm finally getting around to having a look at him. I was really waiting out, hoping I could find a price decently Darkseid somewhere. Online and eBay wasn't helping me at all. Sure enough, though, I found somebody on the Facebook selling group, and that seems to be my place now where I'm buying a lot of my collectibles, the stuff that I'm kind of going back and trying to track down now. Darkseid somebody was selling for, I want to say like $70, and that wasn't a bad price at all considering what he was normally going for. Is he scaled, though, to a character like Kalibak? No. No, sadly, he's not. But, though, I feel like he's scaled pretty decently with Superman. If you are kind of more collecting the classic versions of these characters, I don't know what the likelihood is we're going to be getting a classic version of Kalibak. If we do, though, I would imagine, though, he's probably going to be about that size instead of the size he is right now. Darkseid's a good-looking figure. I mean, again, we are getting the Task Force version of him that's going to be like cell shade. It's going to be a little bit more of a darker blue with some light blue accents on there. In the end, though, I do hope we get ourselves this mold again. I can't imagine, though, that Todd and his team are just looking at this mold as a one-time use. I mean, we're getting him as a Build-A-Figure. I hope we get him again, though, without the cape. Because I do like the look of the cape from the Kenner sense of things. But just as a regular display of Darkseid, I really like to have him rather on my shelf without the cape, personally. I always hope that I can cover every detail when it comes to these characters in these reviews, and sure enough, there is always something I end up leaving off. Thank goodness, though, for final looks, because in the final looks of Darkseid from the DC Classics, one thing that's very apparent, though, in Darkseid, and it's nowhere else on him, is this strange appearance of silver paint around his abdomen area. Here he comes right now. Here he comes. And the weird thing about it, though, is that the front of his torso and his back of his torso almost look like they're two separate halves because there's a seam line there. So it's not on the back of his body, it's only on the front. And it's only in that area, too. Because he's molded in blue plastic, clearly they did it deliberately, but it just seems so out of place that he has silver there and nowhere else. Now, when it comes to the figure's construction, obviously you saw in this review, there are some issues when it comes to keeping things in place, moving his arms and sometimes periodically moving his legs. They end up falling and divorcing themselves from the rest of his body. I mean, it's a simple fix. They're ball joints. You can plug them back in place. But it seems like it happens a lot here with Darkseid. I hope, though, again, we are going to be getting another release of this, not using and changing really anything else to the figure's body. I think they can keep the same body that they have now. I know already we're getting that Build-A-Figure Darkseid for the Task Force line. I hope, again, that they're going to go back to the well when it comes to these molds and release this same mold again, but without the cape. The cape is good for fans of the original Kenner of superpowers, but if you don't like that look of Darkseid, you may be bothered by the fact that this figure still retains that. What do you guys think of Darkseid? Let me know down below in the comments section. Do you guys like the idea that he has as Kenner both the DC logo on his, or the D logo on the front of his chest, not his DC logo, but do you also like that he has his cape, or would you prefer the figure not have it at all? If you guys did also enjoy this video, you can do it a solid and throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? I hope so. Hit that subscribe. Yeah. Turn on that bell. Sure. Okay. And what's the last part? What's the last part? And, of course, making sure you're coming back. Thank you. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.